where he is the anthropologist and historian of the research. Today he will be speaking about From Tudesco to Portuguese, a case study on the Vaz Lopes of Amsterdam. Well,
thank you, Eliezer. For the purpose of this presentation, I would like to, unlike Adam, I would like to wait until the end for any questions or comments. So, when I began studying anthropology and archaeology, I had decided that, if I'm going to be studying other people's, of course, I have to study the own skeletons in my own closet first, so I can be a perfectly ethical professional. So, my family, the Waas-Levie family, comes from Amsterdam. Throughout our oral history, we self-identify as Ashkenazi, the Hachdoets community of Amsterdam. My relative, who I heard about when I was a kid, because she contacted my father, had done excellent archival research on the family, building out an entire family tree of the Waas-Levie family from the 18th century founding to today, including all the branches that were lost in the Shoah. And the earliest known ancestor was identified as this Moses, the son of Abraham, and he was born circa 1724 in Amsterdam. And also interestingly, according to the Ashkenazi community, the Waas family are Levites, but according to the Portuguese community, we are not. So, with the rise of the DNA testing technology, I finally decided, I'd be very interested in having my own family tested to see if it could help with any research. So my father participated and had his DNA tested through FamilyTreeDNA, the lab that Adam and I use, doing what's called a Y-37 panel. The hypothesis was that according to the Ashkenazi community, that we are Levites. So one thought was that, okay, maybe we belong to this famous R1A Levite cluster that's been published many times about by Doron Behar. So maybe we'll have an idea where we came from that, and if not, then maybe we'll have an idea where, if we match any families from Bohemia, Moravia, Germany, the traditional places where the Ashkenazim of Amsterdam came to in the 18th century. This was the result. Normally, as Adam mentioned, with Ashkenazim, there's 1,000, you'll have matches even at this level where you'll have 800 people as your matches because the Ashkenazim are very closely related. And my family, that was not the case. My father's only match at the time was a man from the Marcos Lala family of Aleppo. And so we think, this is, a bit bizarre. We had no family tradition, not like any of these claims like the Horowitzes are, from Samuel Halevi Abulafi or whatever, or Benveniste. None of this tradition. So we said, okay, what does this result mean? Shortly after this result came in, by the way, I should say that the match from the Marcos Lala family waited 6 years until he showed up. That he had his DNA tested, and then he was the only one on his match, and then we showed up in 2014. So this is actually a fairly typical result for Sephardic lineages. After that, I had my father's second cousin test just to make sure, there wasn't, an adoption or some other non-paternal event, and he matched. And then to even further, we tested as part of our study, the Western Sephardi and Eastern Sephardi study. We tested my father's cousin in Amsterdam who descends from the other brother from the 18th century, just to be sure, and he also matched. So we know that unless, there was something going on in the 18th century, this is the lineage of the Waas-Levie. Now we know Vaz Lopes. So what does it mean? As I said, the Marcos family comes from Aleppo. On the basis of this initial Y-STR testing, the relationship was predicted to be somewhere between 500 to 1,100 years ago, but with low confidence because it's STRs and it's not an exact science. Some of those mutations happen very randomly and they can happen in multiple steps at once. For example, Adam mentioned the Sasso family. We tested 2 cousins from the family. They share the same great-great-grandfather, and they don't show up as matches to each other through the matching algorithm of FamilyTreeDNA because one of them had a giant mutation in one step, even though they're very close otherwise. So it looks like they're distant, but they're actually not. So as a part of this, we had the study, as Adam briefly showed at the end, about the haplogroup they belong to, JZ640, which I published about recently, together with our team. And with the NGS testing, this full sequencing of the Y chromosome, we were actually able to get a very highly accurate result that gives the shared ancestor between my family and the Marcos Lala family at around 600 years before present. So fitting right in with where we would expect a divergence to occur for the Sephardi population, beginning of the persecution, 1391, that area, the last century of Jewish life in Iberia, before the conversion. And additionally, the Marcos family, using the proxy of the synagogue records in Salonika, appear to also be a Portuguese family as well, since Marcos only belongs to Lisbon Hadash in Saloniki. So, with this result, we decided, okay, Amsterdam has extensive archives going back into the 16th century. Can we identify a possible candidate? And even though we don't have a document that says, okay, you know, these two sons, Jacob and Abraham Waas-Levie, are the same as Jacob and Abraham Vaz Lopes. So the Moyle, I forget his first name, but from the Nar family, we have the circumcisions of these two sons of a Moses to Abraham Vaz Lopes, 1762, my ancestor, in 1764, the younger brother Abraham, and they match exactly to the marriage bands, their ages that they supply. So combined with the DNA testing plus this, we can say with high certainty, of course it could always change, something new could come up that this is what their family is, and there's no other candidates in Amsterdam. We've exhausted every possibility. So we're pretty confident about this. So this is the initial part of the family tree, just to give you an idea. So Moses, Abraham, Vaz Lopes. Why does the family become Ashkenazi? Because he made the sin of marrying a Tudesco woman, a German woman from Hesse-Kassel in Germany. The family was very poor, so it's not surprising. But so what we found is that he's actually buried in Oudekerk, in the Sephardic cemetery in 1797, but none of his wife is in Zeeburg, the poor Ashkenazi cemetery, and his children are in the Ashkenazi cemetery as well. So he could remain Yehid, but his family could not. One of the interesting things is that this Moses Abraham Vaz Lopes, his father Abraham was born in Salé in Morocco. Just the idea is that this is a microcosm of the Portuguese world as we know it. So he's born in Salé in Morocco, and his first wife is actually a relative, Rachel Krant. She dies shortly after the second child that they had was born, and both of their children did not survive. And then he marries a Giorit from London, who is, we believe, is the mother of Moses, even though the years don't quite line up, but there's a lot of evidence that maybe he was having a relationship with this woman beforehand, because then his relative comes from London, brings her to be formally married in the Jewish community in Amsterdam. Okay. So these are the ketubot and marriage bands of this Abraham. The one on the right is his first one to Rachel Krant, and the one on the left is his second marriage to Sipora Israel. As you can see right here, she signs her name as Sipora Giorit, and that's how, even though in the ketubah she's Sipora bat Abraham Avinu, Sipora Israel bat Abraham Avinu. And this is, so one of the great things about Amsterdam or the Portuguese is we have a lot of these prenuptial agreements, all these legal documents. So this is from his first marriage, and we have the lovely, his lovely signature, and then we have the large D is the, because his mother could not write, that's she wrote a D as her signature, and it says that this is the mark of his wife, and then of his mother, and that his wife also has the same notation. She just has a squiggle as her signature, but her brothers and mother sign as well. Now, this is a little interesting bit of the history. So, Abraham's father Jacob was a merchant in Saleh, Morocco. We know about him being there since at least 1692, because we have a notary document in Amsterdam where he's the merchant mentioned in Saleh for this transaction. So there's that lovely book called The Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean, which is total and complete nonsense, and we won't go into that. But right here, this was an application to the Ma'amad of Amsterdam by his mother, because he himself had been kidnapped by the Barbary corsairs and taken from Saleh to Algiers. He was ransomed from the Captivos Fund of the community for 2,500 florins, which is about, I think, 45 to 50,000 US dollars today. So a pretty expansive sum. But just, again, another piece of this interesting history. So this is the second part of the family tree. So Jacob Vaz Lopes, he's born circa 1664, 1667, maybe a little earlier, but his age comes from because he's most likely a student of the Abi Yatomim Society in Amsterdam, which took care of the orphans, and there's a mention of a Jacob Vaz who fits the right time and age because his father passes away as a young man. And Jacob marries this Deborah in Saleh. We don't know anything else about her. And his father was Abraham Vaz, and also Vaz Lopes. And his mother was Esther Delgado, who was the granddaughter of Abraham Delgado, or Gonzalo Delgado, from the famous Delgado family, and her uncle was João Pinto Delgado. And I don't want to go too far into it, but I have extensive research on this family as well, and it's a very interesting one that connects the network coming from Cordoba in the 14th century all the way into the New World in the 20th century, and this network keeps iterating itself. So for years, we were looking for a document that, because in the Pinto manuscript, it mentions an Abraham Vaz married to Isaac de Pinto's cousin, Esther Delgado, but we didn't know for sure if it was. But here is the prenuptial agreement in Amsterdam that Forbella helped us read through and translate. And you can see the lovely signatures of Abraham Valles, his brother Isaac Vaz Lopes, and his father-in-law Ishak Delgado, who actually went by De Herrera most of the time. And this is from 1653. So I don't include it here today, but there's a lovely notary document from the family in 1657 where Esther's brother had been arrested multiple times by the Amsterdam community, not the Portuguese, but Amsterdam itself, for cavorting with Christian women, to put it nicely. He was seen in prostitution, seeing Christian prostitutes, and arrested multiple times for this. So there's this lovely document saying that Abraham, his brother-in-law, several other cousins all sign of it. It gives their ages. In 1657, Abraham says he's 30 years old. And it's all about that they will make sure that he doesn't get into trouble and he stays out of these whorehouses. That is not what happened. He's arrested multiple times after the fact. He seems to have been a troublemaker. But
he was running his own DNA project.
Yeah, exactly. he was spreading his oats among the people, as we know was actually quite common with the Portuguese, with Christian concubines, which could even be my ancestress who converted to Judaism. But in 1628, this family comes from Visu, and this is the baptism, and more or less this is for sure because we have his grandmother's Inquisition process, which I'll show next, but This one gives his parents' names, Francisco Filho de Henrique Vaz e de sua mulher, Maria Rodriguez, in Viseu in 1628. Shortly thereafter, they moved to Madrid. Actually, Forbella in her master's thesis has the record of when they received the permission to leave the kingdom. So this is part 3 of the family tree. This is all in Guarda District, Viseu. Enrique Vaz, who dies in 1630 in Spain, according to the proceso of his mother-in-law, married to Maria Rodriguez da Vega. Her parents were Francisco Lopes from Mogadoro, and her mother was Guiomar da Vega, who became Sarah in Rotterdam, and she leaves a will in 1653 as well in Amsterdam, Sarah da Vega. And her parents, her father was an old Christian, and her mother was a new Christian, Tome da Vega and Isabel Gomes. And Enrique Vaz's parents were new Christians. They were married in São João de Pesqueira, Antonio Vaz de Alemendra, and Leonor Lopes, and this is their family tree. So this is the genealogy from the proceso I mentioned of Guiomar da Vega, and this is how we know what the family was. So where I've highlighted in blue here is the part that concerns her children and her husband, and it says that her daughter Maria has 3 children, Francisco, Simon, and Maria. And that Maria was the eldest at 5 years old, and there's a Maria baptized in Viseu in 1625 who matches, and this is also again within the Portuguese naming tradition where they're naming after the grandparents, same deal, just with their Christian names. And this is the marriage of Enrique to Maria Rodriguez da Vega in Viseu in 1618. Funny enough, there's an error here. It says that his name is Francisco, which is not true, but it matches all the other data. It says that he comes from São João de Pesqueira. And we have this lovely document from the Denúncias from Coimbra in 1618 that mentions his father. I've underlined Antonio Vaz Alemendra, that he's a freestyle noble, a merchant, that he's married with Leonora Lopes, another new Christian, and that they have their son, Enrique Vaz, who went to Viseu and just recently got married. So, and finally we have from São João de Pesqueira, this is the earliest record of the family. This is the marriage in 1581. It says that Leonor Lopes is the daughter of Manuel Lopes and his wife Maria Lopes, and that Antonio Vaz is from Alemendra, and he's the son of Enrique Vaz and Isabel Fernandez. So the conclusions I have for here today, that interdisciplinary approaches can uncover previously hidden histories. Without this Y-DNA result, honestly, there would have been no reason whatsoever to even look in the archives, the Portuguese archives, for this information, because the family was Stam Ashkenazi. That's what they categorized themselves as later on. After the unification, they intermarried in with Portuguese. So, like my great-great-grandmothers from the Pereira Mendoza family of Amsterdam. And that notarial archives can often fill in these blanks where there are no traditional genealogical sources available. In Amsterdam, they were required by law to have a marriage ban, but a good portion of the Jews did not. So instead, they would have a prenuptial agreement, which was good enough in the eyes of the law that they would register the ketubah and everything. And by combining traditional novel approaches to the study of history, a fuller picture can emerge. This family is just emblematic of the travels of the Portuguese Jews, even the issues of identity moving into the Ashkenazi world in the 18th century. And I want to end with a lovely quote from my grandfather's cousin. He told me when I was sitting with him in Jerusalem that, his aunt told him both of his grandmothers were Waas-Levie from Amsterdam. And his aunt told him that, we are Hochdeutsch, we're not like those Polacks from Poland. So the snobbiness, the pride of the Portuguese Jews that is infamous from Amsterdam seems to have translated into this new definition of that we are, the High Germans, not the Poles. So I want to thank you for the opportunity, and I'm pleased to take any comments and questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And now the questions. For both of you, so maybe you should guess.
I also wanted to point out that Barish is here from Istanbul, and Barish is also a part of our team, yes?
Yes.
Yes? Are there any questions?
Well, I didn't ask during the session.
First of all, at the end of the Visigoth dynasty, Spain was ruthless, okay? They wanted to kill the Jews. When that ended, you had like about a century and a half before the Muslim conquest. That's where that starts. You're 550, okay? That's what you already have. You already had Jews in the first century in Spain, in the Roman period, but they're already coming from North Africa, okay? So then with the Muslim conquest, that's where you see the big boom. Okay, it starts from the end of when the Visigoths finish and before the Muslim period.
Well, we know from the Synod of Elvira that there was fraternization between Jews and non-Jews during that period. Because the three of the elements of their rules, of the 51 rules, one of them was Jewish men may not marry non-Jewish women, that non-Jewish clergymen may not dine in the homes of Jews, and that Jews may not bless non-Jewish fields. So we know that those rules came up to prevent a degree of fraternization that was existing. So I have no doubt that there was, and we didn't really go into it, but the talk that Michael gave in Braganza was on the subject of Iberian non-Jewish Y-chromosomes that we're finding in the Jewish community of Iberia. The Jewish community of Iberia, and now in the Ashkenazi and among the Sephardi. Where did those come from, and when did those enter the Jewish population? And